Hello guys, this is your friend. We are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was trained by Shinigami instead of Jiraiya and got powerful harem with Kushina? P1. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start a new fanfic. Final Valley. The dark clouds loomed around the valley. Lightning and thunder rained as it showed the scars and destruction of a battle of fate. The battle between Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha over the Uchiha's future in either Konoha or Oto. Upon closer inspection, there was only one person on the field in an unconscious state. It was the very blonde who fought against Sasuke. A small trickle of light was on the face of the blonde shinobi. His clothes were little ripped pieces and his body was covered in bruises from the fight. The most noticeable was the one on his chest, like he'd been struck by something hard. Naruto laid in his unconscious state for a little longer, and before any more time passed, someone came to the ground and looked at the blonde with a mournful expression. "Naruto, you must have fought as hard as you could," the person said. They were wearing the standard Jonin vest for Konoha shinobi. They had white hair and their headband was over their left eye with a small cloth covering their mouth. It was Kakashi Hatake, Jonin sensei to Naruto Uzumaki, Sakura Haruno and Sasuke Uchiha. Kakashi looked at the damaged part of Naruto's skin and lifted the blonde into his arms. He flung Naruto over his back and shot off for Konoha, but not before looking back in the opposite direction. "Sasuke," Kakashi said to himself before sighing and running off. The white-haired shinobi knew he had to hurry. He could feel Naruto's heartbeat and it was slowly stopping. "Come on, Naruto. Just last a little longer," Kakashi thought and narrowed his left eye as he looked at the blonde's face. He could only hope that Naruto would be alright. Kakashi could only imagine if Naruto died. So many people would be sad and maybe even Tsunade, their Hokage, would spiral into depression again. "Minato-sensei, what would you do if you were holding your son like this?" Kakashi asked in thought. He had no idea of what was happening with Naruto and how it would shape him to be who he always could be. Naruto's mind. Naruto laid in the emptiness of his mind. His unconscious state was visible to Kyuubi and the fox grumbled at its container. He offered the blonde power, but he still lost and his heart was giving out of him. The darkness around Kyuubi was growing more and more, making the Biju curse. "Fading. It's fading. Am I going to die?" Kyuubi wondered, and before long a white light appeared in front of him. The Kyuubi narrowed his eyes and growled at the newcomer, but quickly paled when he saw who it was. It was a white spirit with purple arms and a sword in its mouth. "So the kid's finally dead, huh? I must say he was kind of lucky. The damn brat escaped me so many times it wasn't even funny," the figure said, and Kyuubi growled again. "Shinigami," Kyuubi said, and the white-haired figure turned to the Kyuubi. The Shinigami narrowed his eyes, then turned back to Naruto. He took out his sword and traced it over the blonde's form. "What's dead is dead. That means you're next, Kyuubi," the Shinigami said to him. He was about to slash at Naruto and rip the blonde's soul from his body, but turns out that fate was against even the Shinigami. "Sasuke!" Naruto yelled immediately and shot up, dodging the blade from the Shinigami in one swift move. Kyuubi widened his eyes and the Shinigami raised an eyebrow. This hadn't happened before in all the times the death god did this. Kyuubi was at least surprised, if not anything else. "Damn it, brat. You sure know how to scare people. I thought I was gonna die because of you for a second," Kyuubi said, and instantly Naruto turned to his unwanted Biju behind its cage. "Furball, what the hell happened?" Naruto asked, making the Kyuubi growl. His container was always a damn smart mouth. It really irritated the fox to no end, but that was a point for another time. "Damn brat. In case you're blind, the Shinigami is right in front of you," Kyuubi said, and immediately Naruto turned his head to see the real thing in front of him. The blonde gulped while the Shinigami looked at him with its menacing glare. "Come on, brat. It's time to die," the Shinigami said, and Naruto immediately stopped paling and his expression changed from one of fear to confusion. "But I'm not dead. Why are you here for me?" Naruto asked and the Shinigami sighed. This was so much better when someone was actually dead and not all into questions. Well, you'll be dead in a matter of seconds, so I might as well just stay here and wait for it. I swear, you humans fight over the simplest of things and die by the simplest of methods, the Shinigami said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes at the god. So fighting to save his friend was supposed to be a simple matter. Well, I don't care if you are the Shinigami or anything else, but I'm not dying till I become Hokage. Naruto yelled, making the Kyuubi grin at its container's disrespect to even the Shinigami. The spirit in question looked at the blonde impassively and sighed. How many people do you think have said that line? I've seen them all. I should just kill you right now rather than wait for your heart to fail. The Jonin that's carrying you isn't gonna make it. You're better off resigning to your fate right now, the Shinigami said, and Naruto stood to his feet, then proceeded to point at the death god. HMPH, I don't care what you think. If I say I'm not dying, then I'm not dying. There are too many people counting on me and I've got to save Sasuke. He might be in, but I'm gonna bring him back, Naruto said, and the Shinigami rolled its eyes. Kyuubi simply remained silent and let its container talk it out with the Shinigami. You think you have a say in this? When you die, you will die. That's your final destiny. You will see me again if by the slim chance that you do survive this, which you won't. Face it, I'm taking you whether you like it or not, the Shinigami said, and Naruto allowed his blonde hair to cover his eyes. He crossed his fingers and glared at the Shinigami, making his conviction and determination clear in his eyes. Well, you're not taking me without a fight. I told you I won't die. Besides, I'm not so weak that I would lose against someone who babbles on about fate and destiny. I'll make it all my own. I'll decide when I die and I'll decide my destiny. So if you think your pale, ghostly, stupid Oni mask wearing face can tell me otherwise, then I dare you to try it. Naruto said, raring to go for a fight. Even if it was small to near non-existent, the Shinigami and Kyuubi found some respect for Naruto. No one had ever threatened the Shinigami before, so this was interesting. The Shinigami looked at the blonde and then he drew his sword back. You really have a mouth, you know. I've got little to no tolerance for you humans and your stupidity, but you're by far the most interesting. No one has talked to me like that before, the Shinigami said, and Naruto took out a kunai from his back pouch. Kyuubi snickered, making the two turn to him. Please Shinigami, if this brat can call the Hokage, old lady, and even me, furball, then there's no way he's gonna respect you that easily. Hell, I doubt he respects anyone, Kyuubi said, and Shinigami had to agree with him even if the death god didn't voice his agreement. Naruto pouted at Kyuubi's insult and huffed. Hey, I respect a lot of people, Naruto said, making Kyuubi roll his eyes while the Shinigami raised his own. I respect Hokage Gigi and all the Hokages, especially the Yondaime, Naruto said with a sense of pride. Kyuubi narrowed his eyes and so did the Shinigami. Naruto looked at the two for a second before he looked confused. Did I say something wrong? Naruto asked. Kyuubi broke from its stupor and so did the Shinigami. The death god wasn't sure, but it was getting off its original purpose. Well, anyway, Naruto Uzumaki, your heart's about to stop, so it's time to. I said no. I'm not dying before I become Hokage. Do what you want, but I'll beat you to a pulp if you try to stop me. Naruto said, thought in his head he knew he was insane. This was the freaking Shinigami. He was lucky it didn't kill him already, and now he had more nerve to threaten the god. Either he was very brave or very stupid, maybe it was both, the blonde wasn't sure. What makes you think you'll do anything? All you've said are words. You humans always say one thing and mean the other. You're no different. Don't think I don't know you, brat. I know how your village treats you. I know everything about you from your birth to right now, so what can you do that would make me think that you're any different from any other human? The Shinigami asked. Naruto looked at the ground as he felt the stares of Kyuubi and the Shinigami on him. The blonde, for some reason, could feel his heart growing colder and colder. He was feeling dazed and his vision was fading. You're beginning to fade, brat. In the next few seconds I'll be taking your soul, the Shinigami said. Kyuubi looked at Naruto and wondered what the blonde was going to do. Naruto in the meantime looked at the kunai in his hand and gripped it tightly. Fine, the Shinigami wanted different, then Naruto could very well do different. The blonde raised the kunai in his hands and in a swift motion surprised the Kyuubi and Shinigami when he used it to pierce his chest. Naruto knew that no blood would come from it, but it showed his conviction well enough to the Shinigami, who was downright surprised. This is how I'm different. My heart is different. I never go back on my word or I have nothing. That's my ninja way. Naruto yelled and the Shinigami narrowed his eyes. If the blonde did that in his conscious state, then there would be no way that he would survive. It's like he just gave his soul to the Shinigami without actually handing it over. All you humans are so stupid, but you're probably the most interesting. Fine then, out of interest I'll let you live. It'll be worth it to see you and your promises, the Shinigami said as it used its sword and struck Naruto in the heart. The blonde gasped at the hit while the Kyuubi narrowed his eyes at the sight. A small light glowed on Naruto's right hand and before long it settled down as the Shinigami slowly placed Naruto on the ground. What did you do to him? Kyuubi asked and the Shinigami turned to the Biju while putting its sword away. I'm going to keep an eye on him, maybe more than that. I've entered a summoning contract with him. Now I'll get to see how different he is from other humans, the Shinigami said and Kyuubi widened his eyes while his tails thrashed the caged. But no one's been in a full contract with you. The only other contract was that life-wasting jutsu, the Shiki Fujin, and only a select few people knew that, Kyuubi said and the Shinigami simply shrugged. It doesn't matter. I'll see how far this brat can handle if he's in a contract with me, the Shinigami said then immediately disappeared. Kyuubi raised an eyebrow then looked at its container. And people say I have a knack for causing trouble. The damn brat is a trouble magnet, Kyuubi said with a small chuckle before disappearing into the seal. Konoha Hospital Room. Naruto opened his eyes hazily and saw he was inside the hospital. The reason he could tell was because of the weird smell it had. Only a hospital could smell like this. The blonde sighed and rubbed his head. Was that a dream? Naruto wondered while rubbing his head. He immediately winced in pain as he touched his chest. It felt like it was slightly burning for a few minutes, but then it subsided, giving the blonde some peace. Naruto sighed and laid back on the admittedly comfy bed. He then widened his eyes when he saw a seal on his right hand. It wasn't over-complex, but the blonde never recognized it before. He could at least see that it was for a summoning contract, however that was all he knew. That's this on my right hand. Naruto wondered and immediately his tenant decided to make its presence known. Brat, you really are stubborn, you know that. To challenge the Shinigami is downright insane, Kyuubi said and Naruto widened his eyes. It wasn't a dream. Him almost dying, his meet the Shinigami, him piercing his chest with the kunai. It was all real. That really happened, furball, Naruto said, making the Kyuubi groan. Yes brat, it did happen, and needless to say, but you did something that almost no one ever did. You actually managed to get a contract with the Shinigami. What he sees in Yori don't know, Kyuubi said with a smirk. Naruto pouted at his Biju, but did admit that he had a point. What did the Shinigami want with him anyway? Naruto's thoughts were soon interrupted by a knock on the door and the blonde turned his attention to it. The door slid open and Naruto saw Sakura appear through the doorway. The blonde immediately frowned and looked at his sheets. Hey Naruto. It's a nice day, let me open the shades for you, Sakura said to him. Naruto didn't say a word as Sakura opened the shades and the window, allowing a cool breeze to flow through. The breeze was a delight to the both of them despite the tense situation. How long was I out? Naruto asked her. Sakura looked out the window and gave him a small smile while her short hair flapped in the wind. At least 3 to 4 days. We thought you'd never wake up, but you and the others are going to be fine, Sakura said to him. Naruto looked at the sheets and couldn't help but frown a bit more. It was then that the blonde was brought out of his thoughts. Naruto, I'll bring him back, Sakura, Naruto suddenly said, interrupting Sakura, who gave a soft smile. She turned to Naruto and with her finest smile she tried to seem at least happy that he and the others were back alive. It's alright, Naruto. I'm gonna train and get stronger so I don't leave you and Sasuke behind anymore. We'll get Sasuke-kun back together, she said, and Naruto grinned at that. The blonde immediately nodded in agreement with her and gave her a thumbs up. You got it, Sakura, Naruto said, and it was then that the pink-haired Kunoichi looked at the seal marking on his right hand. She stared at the marking for a bit before turning to Naruto. Hey Naruto, what's that seal on your right hand? Sakura asked. Naruto looked at his arm and immediately widened his eyes. He had forgotten about it for a second and quickly racked his brain about what to tell her. There was no way she would believe that it was from the Shinigami or that Naruto met the Shinigami at all. Arrow Sennin drew this for myself. It's supposed to be a good chakra storage seal, Naruto said, and Sakura gazed at the seal on his hand for a bit longer before nodding and walked off. Alright then, I guess I'll see you later then, Sakura said to him. Naruto nodded with his usual smile and watched Sakura leave. Naruto sighed and looked at the seal on his hand. How'd I even have this contract? I already have a contract with the Toads, and if I recall, it isn't possible to have two contracts at once, Naruto said, and Kyuubi nodded with his knowledge of that at least. That's true, brat. I don't really know why that is, but since you have this contract, only two things can happen. Either you have both or the Shinigami disbanded your contract with the Toads and made his own, Kyuubi said, and Naruto sighed again. He seemed to be doing that a lot today. Alright, I guess I'll try it out, Naruto said and bit his thumb. He went through the required hand signs and slammed his right hand. Kuchio's number jutsu, Naruto yelled, and his right hand glowed slightly. It faded after a while and Naruto looked around the room, but didn't see any sight of the Shinigami at all. Is this some kind of joke? Naruto asked while wondering if the Shinigami had a sense of humor. I don't take things lightly, nor do I have a sense of humor that I know of. I didn't expect you to summon me so fast though, the Shinigami said from behind Naruto. The blonde gasped and immediately turned his head to see the death god right behind him. Naruto leapt out of the bed and pointed his finger at the god. Why, you're here. I really have a contract with you, Naruto asked, and the Shinigami nodded. That's right. You're the first human to have a full contract with me. The only ones who had an imperfect contract with me were the Sandaime and Yondaime from your village. And I take it you have questions, so let's get them over with, the Shinigami said, and Naruto nodded before sitting back on his bed with his arms and legs crossed. Alright. Where did this contract come from? Naruto asked. The Shinigami sighed and pointed to Naruto's head. When we were talking in your mind. Remember when I said you were the most interesting person to me? I take a general interest in things that are interesting to me, so I'm keeping an eye out for you, and what better way than a summon contract, the death god said, and Naruto nodded with him. Alright, thanks, I guess. So does that mean that my contract with the Toads ended? Naruto asked his newest summon. The Shinigami shook its head and pulled out some beads that were on its hand. No, the contract I have with you is one that the other summons don't know about and never will. You can continue to use the Toads at your leisure, but our contract is more than that, the Shinigami said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why? No, I mean how? Naruto asked, making the Shinigami chuckle slightly. As you know, I'm the Shinigami, the ruler over the living and the dead. If you summoned me like the Yondaime or Sandaime did, then I would have to take your soul as compensation, but since you're my first summon, then I'm going to set the normal conditions. For now, you are only allowed to summon me twice a day. Second, whenever you summon me, I won't take your soul since we have a contract, the Shinigami told Naruto. All this information was burned into the blonde's mind and he immediately agreed. He could only imagine if people thought he could summon the Shinigami. It would be mass chaos. The third condition is more to your benefit depending on how you use it, the Shinigami said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. He was getting excited, but that was to be expected of the first real summoner to the Shinigami. Alright, so what is this final condition or benefit? Naruto asked in a hurry. The Shinigami sighed as it had to remember that it was dealing with a 13-year-old boy, so it wasn't abnormal that he would be excited, though the thought of being someone's summon was sort of interesting to the Shinigami even if it didn't show it completely. Alright, since you know I'm the Shinigami, it's sort of a benefit if you could call it that. Since I rule the dead, you're allowed to bring people back to life if you want to, the Shinigami said, making Naruto widen his eyes and drop his jaw. He could nearly faint from that information. I can revive anyone I want. That's awesome, Dadbao, Naruto said, forgetting his injuries and jumping up and down the room. The Shinigami sighed and its eyebrow twitched. I'm not done with it. This has two parts to it, so pay attention, the Shinigami said, and Naruto nodded, calming down enough to hear the rest of what the Shinigami had to say to him. While you can revive anyone you want, I still have to be the Shinigami, and just allowing you to bring back people would bring disorder to the realm of the dead. So on that note, for every person you revive you must kill 2 people. One to fill the empty space and the second as a sort of interest payment to me, the Shinigami told him. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the last part. But you're the Shinigami, why do you need more souls when you probably have millions of them already? Naruto asked, and the Shinigami nodded. It's like I said. It would cause disorder in the realm of the dead, Naruto Uzumaki. Humans, animals and other things going there is fine because when you die I take you there, but leaving is a completely different matter. No one has ever left my realm, and for good reason that I can't go into right now, the Shinigami said, and Naruto nodding, feeling that some secrecy must have been needed. He wasn't really sure that he wanted to know the consequences. So anything else I need to know? Naruto asked, and the Shinigami stared at him for a second, most likely in thought rather than plain looking. He then focused on the blonde some more and nodded. Last thing is that people like the Sandaime and Yondaime who use the imperfect contract with me can't be revived no matter what. That's the price they pay for the using that jutsu. Their souls are held within this pot right here to never be let out again, the Shinigami said, and Naruto looked at it in awe and slight sadness. In there was his admiration, the Yondaime, and his surrogate grandfather, Sarutobi Hiruzen. The blonde felt so close to them, but so far away. It really made him sad, but for some reason it wasn't as lasting as the blonde thought. Alright, just one last question, Naruto said, and the Shinigami nodded at its summoner. Alright, what is it? The Shinigami asked, and Naruto pointed to himself, making his summon raise an eyebrow. Why me? I mean, why did you chose me to be your summoner? Naruto asked, and the Shinigami had to chuckle. Maybe it was from Naruto's embarrassment of being the summoner to him, or for his own entertainment, the summon wasn't sure. I said it's because you interest me. You're the first person to threaten me of all beings. You're also the first person who had woken up before I could take your soul. Not to mention that even though it didn't hurt, you pierced your chest with that kunai to show how serious to me you were. I think that warrants enough of my interest in you, so like I said, I keep my eye on interesting things, and this is the best way, the Shinigami said, and Naruto nodded. His life just got better, he figured. Alright, I think I understand everything. So I can only summon you twice a day. Unlike those with the imperfect contract, you won't take my soul if I do summon you, and I can revive anyone from the dead so long as I pay back 2 people. Lastly, I can't bring those back who have used you in the imperfect contract, the Shiki Fujin thing that the furball was talking about, right? Naruto asked. The Shinigami nodded in a complete affirmative, and the blonde grinned. Alright then. I don't know what I can do, but I will be a great summoner to you, Shinigami. Is there anything else I can call you? Do you have a name? Naruto asked. The Shinigami raised an eyebrow and shook his head. Naruto sighed and rubbed the back of his head while wincing at the pain in his body. Then I guess I'll call you Shin, which should be short for Shinigami. Is that alright? Naruto asked. The Shinigami shrugged it off and said it didn't matter to the death god at all. Naruto seemed okay with it and nodded. Alright then, Shin it is, Naruto said, and the Shinigami began to fade. Oh, and just so you know, I recommend that you mix your attire slightly. You stick out too much in that orange thing, Shin said before Naruto gritted his teeth. Orange is cool. Naruto yelled and immediately he turned to see next to him looking at him like he was insane. Who are you talking to, Gaki? A white-haired man asked. Naruto turned to him and blushed in embarrassment. Oh, I was thinking out loud as all Ero Sennin. What are you doing here? Naruto asked leaning up from his bed. The man gritted his teeth and pointed at the blonde. I'm not Ero Sennin. I'm the Toad Sage of Mount Myoboku. The women swoon when they hear my name. I am Jiraiya the Toad Sage. The man said, and Naruto sighed at his pervert teacher. He always was weird to the blonde and he would never be any different, but Naruto went with it. Yeah, whatever, Ero Sennin, so what do you want again? Naruto asked him. Jiraiya pouted then grumbled about young people and disrespect to their elders, but then he got serious. Fine, I'll make this quick then. You're going on a 2-year training trip with me. It's time I taught you more, and since you're in the village I'm not around much, but it's a different story if I'm with you, Jiraiya said, and Naruto's eyes gleamed. He instantly smiled, but it lessened when he saw Jiraiya's serious face. But before you go, I'm gonna tell you this now. Give up on Sasuke. He made his choice and nothing will change that. He's a traitor who hurt his friends, his comrades, and went to Orochimaru for power. If you pursue Sasuke, then you are only doing a fool's errand, Jiraiya said, and Naruto looked at the sheets. The blonde narrowed his eyes and he looked at the seal on his right hand. He then touched the seal on his stomach and grinned. Well then, I'll take the fool's errand. To either be wise and have no friends or be a fool with lots of friends, I'll be the fool my entire life. I'll do amazing things on my own. I know Shin will help me, Naruto said, making Jiraiya raise an eyebrow while the blonde cursed. Who's Shin? Jiraiya asked, and Naruto gulped for a second. Sorry, different thought, but you get my point. I'm completely serious, Naruto said, and Jiraiya sighed while jumping off the window ledge. The thought of an idiot like you trying to do things on his own is downright stupid, and I'll be lucky if you don't meet the Shinigami too early, Jiraiya said. Naruto chuckled hesitantly while he looked at his right hand. You've got no idea, Ero Sennin, Naruto thought with a grin. If you're this set on being a fool, then I'll just make sure you have the tools to make this foolish errand. Pack your things. We've got things to take care of right now, Jiraiya said, then shunshined out the window. Naruto stayed in his bed and grinned. He laid his head on the pillow and looked back at the seal on his right hand. The first Shinigami summoner. How cool is that, Dadbeo? Naruto thought, and before long he went to sleep. It was then that the Shinigami, Shin, appeared and looked at his blonde summoner. Hee, a fool's errand, huh? Well, the fools are the most interesting. Looks like I'll get to see something really good, Shin said before finally disappearing. Naruto had no idea what was in store with him in his life. Naruto was finally released from the hospital with Tsunade's approval and immediately went to his apartment. Jiraiya told him that they would be leaving the next day, so that would be enough time for Naruto to tie up any loose ends he had. The blonde had said goodbye to all his friends in that week and told them that he would get stronger in no time. Everyone seemed sad about Naruto leaving, especially Hinata, but they knew that they would see him again. Currently, Naruto was packing his bags full of essentials for his trip, but if one looked close enough they would see that the blonde wasn't entirely focused on packing, but more or less what he could do as the Shinigami's summoner. Those conditions that Naruto knew about had occupied his mind for that entire week. He thought about all the good it could do him to revive people as well as have someone as powerful as the Shinigami. The blonde knew, however, that this was a delicate situation. He might have been dumb and clueless at times, but he was far from stupid. He knew that something like this would be impossible to explain to anyone, especially Tsunade and Jiraiya. If word found out about this, then there would be so many problems that it wasn't even funny. The blonde imagined all the happy faces people would have from loved ones and things like that, but what would they do if he said no to them? Would they force him to do it? Would he be deemed a traitor for him helping his village? Aren't you overthinking this a bit? His tenant asked, making its presence known. Naruto broke from his thought and continued packing. It wasn't like he wanted to overthink something like this, but the whole situation made it that way. It's not that I guess. I've just never felt so responsible before. This is heavy furball. I guess I'm glad that Shin's interested in me, but I can only wonder about the good I can do with him, Naruto said, and Kyuubi allowed its tails to thrash around for a bit out of boredom. HMPH, if it was me, I'd immediately just revive the closet thing to me and kill all of you for compensation, Kyuubi said with a sly grin. Naruto narrowed his eyes and looked up at the ceiling. And that's why you're stuck in there in the first place, Naruto said, bringing Kyuubi's mood down and making the fox growl at him. The blonde chuckled at his tenant and looked at his room. His lonely room that hadn't been in the best of shape. He always tried to keep it clean, but he had always been training, so there wasn't much of a full use for it besides sleep. It was then that Naruto remembered when Shin said that he could revive anyone, and at the time, Naruto immediately thought about his parents. They were the first thing that popped in his head when he heard that. He wondered what it would be like to see his mother, his father. To hold them and see their smiles on his face, but he wondered if he were disrespecting them by wanting to that wish. He also wondered what it would be like for others. How Gaara and his siblings would feel, Hinata and her mother, Neji and his father. Even Sasuke and his family. He could just see Sasuke shocked at the thought of his parents being alive. It all sounded like a good idea, but then there was the second part of the condition. He had to kill 2 people for every 1 person he revived. One to fill the void of the revived soul, and the second as a payment to the Shinigami. Don't tell me you're scared of killing someone, brat. In your line of work, the fact that you haven't really killed anyone yet is amazing. Time to grow up and see how the world works, brat, Kyuubi said, and Naruto looked at the ground. He wanted to argue that against Kyuubi, but he knew that the furball was right. Naruto didn't have the experience that went with killing someone. He had seen deaths before that ranged from Haku and Zabuza to his Jiji. It wasn't a pleasant experience, and the thought of Naruto doing that was felt ridiculous. I suppose, Naruto said as he finished the last of his packing and got to his bed. He put on his pajamas and went to sleep, leaving his thoughts behind for the next morning. Next morning, Naruto groggily woke up and rubbed his eyes from the intense sunlight. The blonde yawned and got out of bed. It was a terrible night. He barely got any sleep at all. The blonde had been thinking all night, but now was the time to get ready. Naruto got to his feet and quickly took a shower. He felt revived from the feeling of hot water on his body and watched it trickle down his form. His spiky hair fell down and covered his face while the blonde leaned on the wall. He stayed in the shower for about 20 minutes before getting out and wrapping a towel over his waist. He came up to his closet and saw the last of his orange jumpsuit and snorted. Why'd he have to tell me to change my attire? I like orange, Naruto said to himself, and Kyuubi rolled his eyes at his container. Are you kidding? You stick out like a sore thumb in that thing. I'll admit that orange goes well with certain colors, but it's not good being the dominant color. Shinigami nailed it right on the head, Kyuubi said, making Naruto growl. The whole world was against him wearing orange. It wasn't that bad of a color, was it? Naruto sighed and decided to put on his signature jumpsuit and grabbed his bag, scrolls and ninja tools for his trip with Jiraiya. He was excited at the thought of getting stronger. He really wanted to bring Sasuke back to Konoha, but the blonde knew that he had his own dreams and ambitions. That wouldn't change for him. He would be more than happy to bring the Uchiha back to his village, but he wouldn't obsess over it. He wouldn't be like Sasuke and have a simple one-track mind. Having grabbed all of his things, Naruto closed the door to his apartment, which wouldn't be opened for the next 2 years, and walked down the stairs. He quickly made it to the streets of Konoha and looked at the various people bustling around. He looked at all the sights and took them to memory since he knew he wouldn't be back for a bit. I'm gonna miss this place, Naruto said, coming up to the gates of Konoha. The blonde saw Jiraiya waiting for him near the gates along with Tsunade, Shizune, and Kakashi. Good morning, Naruto said, and Jiraiya leaned up from the wall his was leaning against. Gaki, you're early, Jiraiya said, and Naruto shrugged his shoulders. He figured that they should just go and get walking. There was no more use in staying in Konoha anymore, so he just decided to follow Jiraiya out of the village. Yeah, I guess I'm just excited, Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head. Jiraiya chuckled with a nod while Shizune and Kakashi grinned. Tsunade walked up to Naruto and placed her hand on his shoulder. Come back, brat. It's gonna be boring without you, Tsunade said, and before Naruto could respond she grabbed him into a fierce, but kind hug. Naruto hugged her back and stepped away. I will, Tsunade-bachan. Just keep that Hokage seat warm for me until I get back, Naruto said, making Tsunade's eyebrow twitch. She proceeded to grab his cheeks and squeeze them hard. You really have a mouth, you know that, Tsunade said while Naruto yelled out in pain. She finally let go and Naruto rubbed his cheek while sticking his tongue out at her. Tsunade glared at Naruto and simply waved it off. She had no idea what made her think she would miss Naruto, but the truth was that she would. She really couldn't wait till he got back. It would be amazing to see how much he would grow. Take care, Naruto-kun, Shizune said, giving Naruto a softer hug. Naruto grinned with a nod and came up to Kakashi. The Jonin was still reading his book, but patted Naruto on the shoulder. You're not a kid anymore, Naruto. Come back stronger than you are now, Jiraiya said to him and lowered his book, which showed an eye smile to the blonde. Naruto nodded and was about ready to go. He turned to Jiraiya and the Toad Sage smiled at him. Come on, Naruto. We've got to get moving, Jiraiya said before Naruto raised an eyebrow. I thought you said I was early, Naruto said, and Jiraiya shrugged his shoulders. No use spending time here. I already have our first destination in mind, so let's go. We've got a lot of ground to cover, Jiraiya said, walking past the gates. Naruto nodded and immediately the two set off away from the village. Naruto turned back to look at Konoha one last time and sighed before moving back with Jiraiya. He's gonna be a headache when he gets back, Tsunade said, and Kakashi had to nod in agreement with her. Shizune merely smiled and walked back to the Hokage mansion. Tsunade walked back with her and Kakashi shunshined out of sight to take care of some other business that he had to deal with. With Jiraiya and Naruto, the master and student duo had been walking for a while now, but much to Jiraiya's surprise the trip was relatively quiet for the most part. Sure, they just started and weren't that far from the village, but he thought Naruto would be bugging the hell out of him with what he would be learning. However, as luck would or wouldn't have it, Naruto was in some deep thought that obviously continued from last night. He wondered about some of the issues that would revolve his life, and while he seemed to like the positive, he wasn't blind to the reality that things could go to hell for him. Naruto still seemed to be off in his own little world. He wasn't even really paying attention to where he was going. Jiraiya had never pegged Naruto for a deep thinker about anything, so this was entirely new to him. Hey brat, we've been traveling for 20 minutes and you haven't said a word the entire time. What's the matter with you? Jiraiya asked, and immediately Naruto snapped from his thoughts. He hadn't realized that he was thinking so much. Oh sorry Ero-sennin, just thinking about this training that you're going to have me do. I'm gonna learn some killer techniques, right? Naruto asked, making Jiraiya sigh. So that's what it was, or so he believed. Always training with you, Of course I'm gonna teach you something good, but not today. We'll begin first thing tomorrow. You'd better be prepared, brat, Jiraiya said, and Naruto's eyes gleamed in excitement. He could only imagine the great things that he would be able to do after his training was complete. Soon silence reigned with the two again, and Naruto looked at the ground. He seemed confused, or rather uncertain of something. The blonde looked up and turned to his teacher for the next 2 years. Ero-sennin, what was your first kill like? Naruto asked, making the Toad Sage narrow his eyes at the unusual question. Naruto already was unusual, but to add that question made him even more unusual. Jiraiya turned to see the blonde looking at the ground before he looked back up at the road in front of him. What's with this question? It's not like you, Gaki, Jiraiya said, getting a little worried. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and softly smiled, but the look in his eyes told Jiraiya that the blonde was contemplating something. I guess it's curiosity. Sorry for being weird about it. I just wanted to know how you dealt with it. I wonder if you'll have me fighting bandits or something, so I just thought I'd be prepared for whatever, Naruto said, and while Jiraiya could see the small logic in Naruto's thinking, he was still concerned, though against his better judgment he decided to tell Naruto. For me it didn't go well. I really thought low of myself to kill someone. It was back when I was a genin like you. I cried and cursed myself. I even stopped eating for about 5 days. Luckily Sarutobi-sensei and Tsunade helped me deal. Orochimaru tried, but he wasn't the comforting type, but he told me in his own way. They just reminded me that this was a part of my job and it came with the responsibility. As long as I don't find the joy in it, then I'm still human, Jiraiya said, and Naruto nodded like he had just affirmed something for himself. Jiraiya saw the small smile on Naruto's face, and the sight of it made the man's heart lighten a little. He then spotted the seal on Naruto's right hand and gazed at it. It looked very complex and powerful. Even he, with all his knowledge on Fuinjutsu, didn't know what type of seal it was. Hey Naruto, what's that seal on your hand? Jiraiya asked. Naruto mentally gulped and cursed that he didn't have the common sense to try and hide the damn thing. Of course people would ask him where he got something like this. Who wouldn't? Even Sakura asked what it was, and she normally didn't take any interest in what Naruto did. The blonde looked at his seal, his connect to the Shinigami, the god of death. Oh, this is a storage seal that someone made for me. They said that it could help me with my training. It's supposed to keep my other chakra from getting too wild and allowing me to control it better, Naruto said, hoping that was enough to get by. Jiraiya looked at the blonde intently, and Naruto tried his hardest to look calm so that Jiraiya would buy it. He mentally gulped and was about to break down, but luckily for him Jiraiya stopped and turned to the road. That's one nicely made seal. For me to not even know it must be something good. Well, we'll see about during your training, Jiraiya said, and Naruto accepted that. He could pass this off, but it made the blonde burn into his mind that he needed to get his right hand covered. It didn't matter with what, but it just needed to be covered at the moment. Close call, huh brat? Kyuubi asked, snickering since he watched the scene in front of his container's eyes. He could almost laugh his heart out when he saw that. Meanwhile, Naruto grumbled at his tenant. That wasn't funny, furball. I thought I was gonna get found out for a second. Man, that was scary, Naruto said, mentally making Kyuubi giggle. So are you finally going to stop acting like a wimp and kill somebody, or are you still worried about that? Kyuubi asked, and Naruto looked at the ground. He wasn't sure if he was still alright with killing someone, but for his parents he would do anything. He was sure that he would have a tough time dealing with it, but he was sure that he could work it out. He was Naruto Uzumaki, he never backed down. Sure, he was unsure about it, but he thought it would be right. He could only hope that when his parents were brought back then they would feel the same way. He then widened his eyes and looked at Jiraiya with a sigh. Ero Sennin, do you think we could go shopping also? I need some new clothes, Naruto said, and Jiraiya stopped walking. Naruto stopped a bit in front of him and raised an eyebrow. Ero Sennin, Naruto asked, and immediately the blonde was brought into a hug. I knew you weren't a lost cause kid. You're damn right, we'll go shopping and get you out of that damn orange monstrosity you call clothing. I can't believe you finally see the light, Jiraiya said, crying, and Naruto's sweat dropped. Oh come on, was orange really that bad that Jiraiya had to cry tears of joy that Naruto was changing his attire? I still want some orange in it. No matter what you think, orange is cool and I like it, Naruto yelled, and Jiraiya sighed before setting the blonde down. Deal, kid. This might be a good trip after all. Let's hurry, the first town is still quite a ways away. We'll be there by nightfall if we hurry, Jiraiya said, picking up the pace. Naruto nodded and ran after his sensei with a simple smile on his face. Atofika Gai, homely woman town. Naruto and Jiraiya had just made it to their first stop for the day. It was the same town where Naruto had met Itachi for the first time. It still brought back memories of the time he saw Sasuke get crushed by his brother like the Uchiha was nothing to him. It was that same Itachi who killed his entire clan and made Sasuke the person he was, even though Sasuke had a part in that himself. The sun was still high in the sky for Naruto, so they were still making some good time. He wondered why Jiraiya wanted to stop here, but he got his answer when he saw Jiraiya's perverse giggling while he dashed off to the nearest brothel he could find, leaving Naruto to his own devices. Perverted old man, Naruto said in thought. Immediately after registering them, Jiraiya shot off. It was a sad day to be the apprentice of the Toad Sage for Naruto Uzumaki. Having placed his things on the floor next to his bed, Naruto got up and stretched his legs for a bit. He had been walking for quite a while and his feet were killing him, but he did have other things on his mind at the moment. Naruto looked at the seal on his right hand and sighed. It really wasn't that simple after all, was it? Sigh, even if I do call the Shinigami for my parents, I doubt he knows them specifically from all the souls he has. The only ones who probably even have a hint about it are Tsunade Bachin, since she's the Hokage, and possibly Ero Sennin, since he knows just about everything that goes on in Konoha. Man, I should have asked Tsunade Bachin about it before we left. I wouldn't have put it past Gigi to know who my parents were also. I wonder why they won't tell me. Granted, I never really asked, but still, Naruto thought. He knew nothing about his mother or father other than the fact that they lived in Konoha and that they loved him a lot. He didn't know if they were shinobi or civilian. He knew next to nothing, but that's why he was so excited. To get to know his parents, what child didn't want that? Would you stop complaining and do it already? Man, you can't make up your damn mind. I would do it in a heartbeat, Kyuubi said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. I don't know anything about them. How do I know if Shin can bring them back if I'm not specific? Naruto asked, and the Kyuubi sighed. So ask him. He said you could summon him twice a day, so do it. Man, you're so damn irritating with your whole, I want my parents back, but killing people is bothering me, thing, Kyuubi said, and Naruto sighed. Well, sorry for not being a heartless fox demon that could kill everyone in a matter of seconds, Naruto said, and Kyuubi snarled. You better be lucky I'm in this cage, brat, or I'd kill you where you stood, Kyuubi spoke, making Naruto roll his eyes. Whatever, furball, Naruto said before the two cut their argument short. The blonde bit his left thumb and traced the blood across the seal. Kuchio's no jutsu, Naruto yelled out, and immediately the light shined again, making the blonde cover his eyes from the light. Naruto looked around for his summon again, but didn't see him. He was about to curse, but then remembered the last time. Naruto quickly turned around and grinned when he saw Shin right behind him, like he thought. You're not sneaking up on me this time, Naruto said, and the Shinigami looked at the blonde with its gazing stare on him. Well, you certainly picked an interesting time to summon me. Now you can only summon me one more time for today, so what do you want? Shin asked with his arms folded. What's wrong with you? Naruto asked, and Shin sighed. He really had nothing wrong with him, and he didn't mind being summoned by Naruto in the least. Sorry, I've really got no reason. Maybe it's that I don't like being summoned for just a casual conversation, the Shinigami said to the blonde. Naruto nodded and stood to his feet and rubbed the back of his head. It's not for casual conversation, Shin. I actually have a question about the resurrection thing that you said I could do, Naruto told him. Shin raised an eyebrow and nodded while waiting for his summoner to tell him what it was. Alright, what do you want to know? The Shinigami asked. Naruto nodded and looked at the ground for a second before turning back to the Shinigami. When I ask for you to revive someone, do I have to be specific? I figured that with all the souls you have, then you wouldn't know who I wanted if I just asked, Naruto said, and the Shinigami nodded. That was a good question that Naruto asked, as far as the Shinigami knew, and who was he to deny his summoner an answer? Well, I can keep track of all the souls, but if you want someone specific then a name does help my search just in the very slim chance that I get it wrong. Also some defining characteristics, but names are generally alright, Shin said, and Naruto knew it and cursed. He didn't know either of his parents' names and that infuriated the blonde, but at least Shin told him so he could do the appropriate thing. Alright, if I ask you to revive someone then how long will I have to kill the two required people? Naruto asked. The Shinigami looked at him and raised an eyebrow before it thought over his question. At the most you have one of your human weeks. You only get 1 week, and if I don't have the two then I'll take the soul back. On the chance that you have one kill, but not the other, then you have a week and a half. So if you kill one person of the two, but couldn't deliver the other to me then you get an extra 4 days, Kyuubi said, and Naruto widened his eyes. So he could do it that way. Alright, thank you Shin. I'll summon you if I have anything else, Naruto said, and the Shinigami nodded then began to fade into nothingness, leaving Naruto all alone in the room. Well, almost alone. Are you happy now? Sheesh. Now get that toad sage to tell you about your parents. It's like you said, he's a Sannin, so he should know about you if he's willing to train you. There is no doubt that he knows who your parents are, Kyuubi said, and Naruto nodded in agreement with his Biju for once in his life. I suppose you're right. Guess I'll just have to ask him straight out and hope for the best. I'll get him to talk, Naruto said with a grin while Kyuubi rolled his eyes. He had such a weird container. Nighttime. Naruto sighed as he waited for Jiraiya. The damn guy was taking so long to get back. Could he really spend that much time at a brothel and not come back? He must have been broke by now. In all that time, Naruto was busy thinking about his parents the whole time. He had even tried to do the Rasengan with one hand instead of the clone, since using a clone took too much time and he would need every second that he could use in a fight for his life. He had only a little success with it. He had left earlier to buy balloons for help, but that it was harder than he thought. He remembered when Jiraiya only did it with one hand. He didn't even use his other hand to handle the rotation of it. He really had mastered the Rasengan, even if he was a good-for-nothing pervert. Naruto was currently working on his leaf exercise for the time being. He was actually making a new record for himself. He really didn't like this patient type of thing, but if he was going to get stronger then he would need to have better chakra control. However, it didn't take long for Naruto's concentration to be interrupted by the turning of a lock by a key, and the blonde turned to see Jiraiya coming through the door completely drunk. The blonde's sweat dropped as he watched Jiraiya giggle. Hee hee hick, hey brat. Man, that hick girl was wonderful. You need a girl Naruto or you'll be a hick virgin for the rest of you hick life, hee hee hee, Jiraiya said with his voice completely slurred. Naruto sighed and stood to his feet. Man, you're drunk. I guess I'm not getting anything out of you today. Damn it, Kami hates me, Naruto said, grabbing Jiraiya. Hold it, brat. Kami might actually like you. I tell you, drunk people are open like a book. Try getting it out of him now. I doubt he'd remember it tomorrow anyway. Just try, and if it doesn't work then you'll just have to try something else, Kyuubi said, and Naruto squinted his face. Isn't that kind of taking advantage of him? Naruto asked, and Kyuubi held up one of his claws. Well, one, you're a shinobi, you're supposed to take advantage of others' weaknesses. Second, I will give you a certain list. Your money, your time, your patience, no matter how little it is, and even though you didn't ask him, your parents. I think he's taken advantage of you enough, Kyuubi said, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. He really hated it when Kyuubi had his points. He knew he was right, and while Naruto wanted to disagree with that, he very well knew he couldn't. Alright, fine. I doubt this will work, but I'll try, Naruto said, and Kyuubi nodded with a sly grin for its container. It's about time he started to show some talent as a shinobi. Naruto sighed and huffed as he trudged Jiraiya towards his bed. He told Sage was heavy, but Naruto wasn't about to complain. He knew Kyuubi was right. He was a shinobi, and to get information you had to do things that you didn't want to, and this was one of them. Naruto sat Jiraiya on the bed and backed away from him. Jiraiya looked completely buzzed that it made Naruto wonder if this would even work at all. Ero Sennin, who are my parents? Naruto asked him. It was short, sweet, and to the point. No beating around the bush at all for Naruto. Jiraiya giggled a little more for a few seconds and leaned up on the bed. He wouldn't you like to hick no kid? I'll tell you, Minato and Kushina really broke the mold when they had you, Jiraiya said to him. Naruto widened his eyes when he heard their names. Minato and Kushina. Their names sounded so nice and very cool to Naruto. The blonde gulped and continued his actions. Who were they? Naruto asked and Jiraiya leaned his head to the wall. Are you kidding, kid? Minato Namikaze was considered a genius shinobi. He was the Yondaime Hokage after all, Jiraiya said, talking about his student. Naruto's eyes shot open and the blonde dropped his jaw. His father was the Yondaime. The man he respected all his life was the one who put the Kyuubi inside him. And Kushina Uzumaki. Hehe. She was such a firecracker. I tell ya, sometimes I wondered who wore the pants in that relationship. She was a beauty, however. Nice long red hair, a slight tomboyish attitude, but still caring. The way she handled a sword was also amazing. It still makes me chuckle when I remember that she was called the Red Hick Death. Quite the looker she was. When she was younger, she had to beat some of the guys with a stick to stop asking her out. She was also unique in many ways. Her chakra was so amazing. She could use her chakra like chains. It was amazing, Jiraiya said, and immediately Naruto was interested. The way Jiraiya talked, it was like his mother was drop dead gorgeous. He was, however, sad that he couldn't bring back his father. He remembered when Shin told him that he couldn't be brought back since he had used the Shiki Fujin technique. Naruto would have really liked to see his father. To talk with him and his mother. To maybe punch his father in the face or stomach for sealing the Kyuubi inside him, but he was just happy that he got to learn about them. Did they really love me? Naruto asked the drunken Jiraiya. The toad sage chuckled and looked at Naruto while patting him on the shoulder. Kid, they really did love you. When Minato wanted to make you a Jinchuriki, you should have seen Kushina's reaction. She went ballistic on him. Though why I know. She was the Kyuubi's previous Jinchuriki, Jiraiya said, and Naruto gasped. His mother was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi before him. Did you know about that? Naruto asked. Kyuubi snorted and rolled his eyes. Please, with how tight they made that damn seal, I didn't know anything. I had no idea who I was trapped inside. It could have been anybody for all I know, Kyuubi said, and Naruto sighed. Alright, Ero Sennin, even though you're drunk, thanks for telling me. I doubt you'll remember this talk, Naruto said as he got up and left the room and turned out the light. Jiraiya giggled a little more, but before long that giggle dropped and Jiraiya gave a small smile along with softened eyes. I guess I played that off quite well. I didn't really want to tell him this early, but I guess he could at least know them. He's at least strong enough for now and he's with me. I can only hope that he learns to keep his mouth shut about his family. Kami only knows what would happen if he starts talking, Jiraiya said to himself with a smile. His sober face looking more and more gentle as he looked at the moon. I'm sure you two would have wanted him to know also. I can only hope that he's good for training tomorrow, Jiraiya said before changing out of his clothes and going to sleep in his bed. With Naruto. Naruto walked the streets of town and went over all that Jiraiya told him. He kept thinking back to his father and mother. The greatest Hokage of Konoha and the best Kenjutsu user of Konoha were both his parents. It was a lot to take in for the blonde. He wasn't sure whether to be happy or sad. Happy that his mother could be revived, happy that he knew his family, and happy that they loved him, but sad that his father was gone for good. He sealed the Kyuubi inside him and he hadn't been told about them until just now. Yano Kyuubi, I'm confused right now, Naruto said, and Kyuubi sighed. It knew that this was to be expected from just hearing what Naruto had just heard, so maybe it was like that. I suppose I can understand, but you'd better be happy, brat. Sheesh. Just revive the woman already. No doubt she wants to see you too, Kyuubi said, and Naruto nodded in agreement with that. I suppose you're right. Yeah, I can only hope she's not mad at me for what I'm about to do, Naruto said and ran off from the town and deep into the woods. He still wasn't sure about the payment for his mother and her soul, but he'd do it. On that he knew that he would, he promised himself that he would. Naruto came into a secluded spot of the forest and looked around. Kyuubi told him that no one was there and he was alright, which had the blonde confused. Why are you helping me so much? Until a week ago we hated each other, Naruto said, and Kyuubi scoffed at his container. Don't assume anything, brat, or get sentimental on me. I don't know why I'm helping you either. Maybe I'm just bored and need something interesting to happen, Kyuubi said, making sure Naruto understood. The blonde could only chuckle at his tenant and nodded with his usual grin. You mean a lot to me too, furball, Naruto said, and Kyuubi huffed. Whatever, brat, Kyuubi responded, and Naruto bit his left thumb. This was the last time he could summon the Shinigami, so he had to make it count this time. Naruto traced his blood over the seal and yelled. Kuchio's no jutsu. Naruto yelled out, and the same blinding light made Naruto cover his eyes, and he immediately turned around to see Shin right behind him as always. 2 times in one day. I didn't think you'd need me this much already. Alright, what do you want now? The Shinigami asked. Naruto gulped and felt nervous. He had never done this before, so it was all new to him. Shin, I want to revive someone, Naruto said, and the Shinigami raised an eyebrow. He took his sword out of his mouth and took the purplish beads in his hands and gripped them. Wow, already? Alright, I was expecting it much sooner. You are aware of the terms to our contract, right? Shin asked, and Naruto immediately nodded that he was more than aware of what he was getting himself into. He wanted to see his mother and he wanted her to see him. He was still nervous, but his resolve was absolute. For every person I want you to revive, I must kill 2 people. One to fill the revived person's space and the next as compensation to you, Naruto said, and the Shinigami nodded, glad that the blonde fully understood. Good. You have 1 week to honor your side of the contract, the Shinigami said, and Naruto immediately nodded. The Shinigami pressed his beads together and rubbed them with his hands. Naruto watched him go through the process, and so did Kyuubi. The Shinigami drew his sword and wrapped it in the beads. Who would you like to bring back from the dead? The Shinigami asked. Naruto gulped again, but he quickly nodded and balled his fists. My mother, Kushina Uzumaki. The woman with vibrant red hair, also known as the Red Death, Naruto said, and the Shinigami nodded. His eyes glowed a white light and his sword glowed white also. Strange seals started to appear, and before long the entire area was covered in a blinding light. Naruto covered his eyes for a bit as he tried to see, but for all his life he couldn't. The contract is made. Kushina Uzumaki is revived, the Shinigami said, and immediately disappeared. The light disappeared and the night reigned only with the moon giving the light. Naruto opened his eyes and stared at the lovely woman in front of him. Naruto had to admit that Jiraiya wasn't kidding. Beautiful was an understatement for his mother. She was so gorgeous. Her vibrant red hair, her slender body. She was wearing a high-collared, sleeveless blouse under a long, loose-fitting pale, white skin that glowed in the moonlight and amazing blue eyes. She was wearing some simple, purplish shinobi sandals. Kushina walked into the light and came up to see a blonde with yellow hair and whisker marks. She wasn't sure what was going on, but she knew one thing. That was her son. Only her son had whisker marks on his face. She gently smiled at the shocked expression on his face as she stepped into the moonlight for Naruto to see, and she got a good look at him before giving a small smile. Hello, Naruto-kun. It's your mother. Naruto continued to stare at his mother. Part of his mind couldn't believe it. Kushina, his mother, was alive, and she just continued to stare at him with a gentle smile. The moon reflected her beauty, giving her an almost goddess-like appearance. Her long red hair, her smooth face that didn't contain one blemish anywhere. It was then that Naruto could understand why Jiraiya told him that Kushina had to beat off some guys with a stick. She was a drop-dead gorgeous woman. Kushina watched her son look at her like he was stunned by her presence. She could understand, but she wanted more than Naruto to stare at his mother. "Aren't you going to say anything, Sochi?" Kushina asked with a girl. Naruto continued to look at her and his entire body trembled. His hair covered his eyes and he looked at the ground. Kushina raised an eyebrow, but she was treated to the sight of tears going down Naruto's face. The blonde smiled and wiped his face. "Ka-san." Naruto yelled as he ran to his revived mother and quickly grabbed her into a hug. 13 years of loneliness caught up with Naruto, 13 years of no one there for him, no mother, no father, but that was gone. Kushina widened her eyes at the initial contact as she saw Naruto bury his face into her clothes. Kushina gave a gentle smile and wrapped her arms around her son. "Come on, Sochi, your mother is here and you're crying," Kushina said, trying to get her son to calm down. But she could understand why he was like this. Sure, she had no idea why she was alive in the first place, but if her son was alive then she knew it would have something to do with him, but she didn't care at the minute. She just wanted to feel the warmth that she didn't get except the one time where she hugged Naruto as a baby, so for now she was just going to settle for this feeling. Some time had passed for the mother and son as they stayed in the field. Naruto had finally calmed down and Kushina was more than happy to allow her son the time he needed. Both sat on the ground and silence soon reigned in the forest. This was an awkward situation for Naruto since he wasn't really sure how talking with his mother was supposed to go. Seeing her son's distress about talking, Kushina decided to start the conversation. "So Sochi, it's good to see you. You've grown from the last time I saw you," Kushina said, and Naruto smiled while he rubbed the back of his head. The blonde blushed with a chuckle and turned to his mother. "Thanks, Ka-san. It's good to see you. I still can't believe you're here," Naruto said, and Kushina smiled with a nod. She wondered what that would mean for the chakra that Minato put for her into the Kyuubi seal, but that was beside the point right now. "Believe me, seeing my Sochi alive and well is nice also, but would you tell me why I'm alive at all?" Kushina asked, and Naruto gulped. He hadn't thought that far ahead to an explanation. The blonde sweated and Kushina glared playfully at him. She had to admit that not even Minato could keep something from her, and the same could be said about Naruto. The blonde sighed and rubbed the back of his head. "Well, you're not going to believe me from how this story goes," Naruto said, and Kushina raised an eyebrow. How could he say that? A mother was supposed to trust her son's word. Naruto also didn't seem like the type to lie, and if he was, then Kushina would straighten that out now. "Sochi, I can't even believe I'm alive right now. You've got nothing that will surprise me," Kushina said with a confident grin. Naruto gave a blank face, and in the back of his mind he heard Kyuubi laughing like mad at Kushina. She really had no idea that her son was the most unpredictable ninja of Konoha. "Alright, Ka-san, you're gonna regret those words," Naruto said and began his story. He told his mother everything down to the last detail. Needless to say, Kushina was very surprised and the look of utter shock was evident on her face. Naruto told her about nearly dying at Final Valley, his fight with Sasuke Uchiha, and even him meeting the Shinigami. Kushina gulped when she heard all of this and had to worry about Naruto even more. Naruto also shocked Kushina to her core when he said that the Shinigami found interest in him and signed a contract with him. Now that had Kushina's interest. For Naruto to sign a contract with a god was nice, in fact it was downright amazing, but she could only worry about it. "And so Ka-san, Shin said that I could only revive you if I killed 2 people, Naruto said, and Kushina widened her eyes. Naruto agreed to those terms and he brought her back. Does that mean Naruto killed already? Or did he not do it yet? Kushina wanted to be angry if only slightly, but the look of small shame on Naruto's face told her that the blonde had antagonized about the decision. She also didn't know whether to be happy or mad. Happy that Naruto loved her enough to want to do anything to see her, or sad that he would kill people just to see her. Maybe it was a meaningless thought, but Kushina didn't see it that way. So that's what happened, Kushina said, and Naruto nodded in all honesty. The last person he would lie to was his own mother, and besides Kyuubi no one else knew about his contract to the Shinigami, so he would have liked for someone to talk with about it. That's right, Ka-san. Are you mad at me? Naruto asked and was ready to get hit like he always was from Sakura. Kushina looked at her son, who was ready to accept her punishment, and while Kushina did worry over it, she wasn't going to hit Naruto for it. Instead, she lightly smacked Naruto upside the head, making the blonde yelp. The redhead then took Naruto into a hug, making the blonde gasp. It's all right, Sochi. I'm here for you. I'm not mad, just surprised. So tell me, how were you in Konoha? Kushina asked, and the small look on Naruto's face told her she was going to regret that question. How right she was when Naruto told her about his early life and all the loneliness he felt. Kushina felt so downhearted about the whole thing. She apologized multiple times throughout the story, and it took Naruto multiple times to assure the redhead that he had been over it. He told her that most of the village had accepted him and the people he cared for. He told her about his dreams of being Hokage, and Kushina chuckled that Naruto really was her son. She had said the same thing back when she was younger than him. It did make her happy that her son had the same dream as her. Soon enough, Naruto told her his entire life, and Kushina smiled while looking at the sky. You did a good job, Sochi. I can't believe you beat a Hyuga. Those arrogant pricks, Kushina said, making Naruto sweat drop. The blonde was seeing how late it was inside, but he didn't want to stop talking to his mother just yet. So Ka-san, Ero Sennin told me that you really knew how to handle a sword, Naruto said, and Kushina raised an eyebrow. Somewhere she remembered that name, but she for all her life couldn't remember where. Ero Sennin, Kushina said, and Naruto grinned before whispering in her ear. Kushina widened her eyes and smiled. Jiraiya was still up to his no-good trick as usual, and now he was teaching her son. Oh, there was going to be some observation on her part. So tell me, Naruto-kun. Did Jiraiya train you like me and Minato wanted? Kushina asked, and Naruto widened his eyes. Kushina stared at him, and Naruto narrowed his eyes. When was he supposed to train me? I've only just met Ero Sennin around the Chunin exams, Naruto said, and it was Kushina's turn to widen her eyes. You mean he didn't look after you like I told him to? Kushina said, and Naruto shook his head. Kushina's hair covered her eyes, and she gave a small chuckle while her hands gripped her clothes. What about Tsunade? She told me she'd look after you as your godmother, Kushina said, and Naruto shook his head. The mother of Naruto chuckled even more as the ki rolled off her body. Her hair started to raise in an odd way. The blonde backed away. So they didn't raise him like Minato and I asked them to, huh? Kushina thought and slowly calmed down. Oh, she would have a few good words with those two about responsibilities and the such. However, luckily for them, Naruto managed to distract her thought with another question. So were you good with a sword, Ka-san? Naruto asked, and Kushina turned to her son. She smiled at him, wanting to know more about her, and nodded. That's right, Sochi. Your mother was really good. I really struck the fear into most people who saw me. Really only your father and the cage passed me. Hee. If Tsunade wasn't around, then I might have been known as the strongest woman in Konoha, Kushina said with pride. Naruto's eyes gleamed, and he looked at his mother in a new light. Kushina looked up at the sky again and smiled. Well, Sochi, it's late. Maybe you should go now, Kushina said, and Naruto got to his feet. He turned to his mother and watched her raise also. So are you coming back with me? Naruto asked. Kushina thought over the question. She wasn't sure if Naruto would be able to explain to Jiraiya about her, but she didn't want to leave her son after meeting him. She had missed a bit of his life and didn't want to be out of it anymore. Naruto could see her thinking it over, and the blonde wondered how the hell he would explain this to Jiraiya. He would be suspicious of Naruto, and then the blonde would have to tell the old sage his secret. Granted, he did really want it to be a secret, but it was starting to turn out that way. Naruto had to remember Kakashi's lesson. Deception was a shinobi's greatest tool. Naruto thought it over for a little longer and soon his eyes gleamed. The blonde turned to his mother and motioned for her to come to him. Kushina raised an eyebrow and leaned forward while Naruto whispered in her ear. Kushina widened her eyes and smiled. That was just like her son. With Jiraiya. Jiraiya laid on his bed contemplating his words to Naruto. He knew that he should have waited until Naruto was a chunin to tell him, but who didn't want to know their parents? Jiraiya would have been furious if someone knew his parents and didn't tell him who they were. Naruto had been gone a long time and Jiraiya wondered if the blonde was only seeking some peace. Sigh. Naruto, how long are you going to be gone? Jiraiya wondered and soon he got his answer when the door opened. Jiraiya smiled and turned around. Gaki, you're late. Were you really that shocked? Jiraiya stopped and widened his eyes when he saw a sight that should have been impossible. Jiraiya gasped when he saw Kushina come through the door. KKK Kushi. Jiraiya stopped when he saw Kushina's smile. It was weird she was smiling, but her eyes they weren't at all. Soon Naruto came through the door and the blonde smiled. Hey Ero Sennin, Naruto said and Jiraiya turned to Naruto while his finger was pointed at Kushina, Naruto's mother. Naruto, do you know who this is? Jiraiya asked and Naruto turned to her and smiled at her. Kushina smiled at her son before the blonde turned back to his sensei. Yes, I know. She's my mother, Kushina Uzumaki, right? Naruto asked and Jiraiya nodded, but she was supposed to be dead. And she was walking around like she had been living all her life. But how? Jiraiya asked and Naruto grinned. Kushina smiled and walked up to Naruto. I thought I could work on a type of seal like you did, Ero Sennin. It only worked that one time, but Kyuubi told me that if given enough chakra into one clone then it can be a beacon for a replacement soul so long as a seal with the kanji of the person's name is on it. So I wrote Ka-san's name on it and poured nearly all my chakra into it. Kyuubi said that the only reason I could do it is because of my large reserves. It would kill any normal person, Naruto said and feigned exhaustion. Jiraiya looked at Naruto like he was insane for listening to Kyuubi of all people and then turned to Kushina. Jiraiya had no doubt that it was Kushina, her chakra signature, her features and the smile that made most men gulp. Yep. Jiraiya could try to deny it, but that was Kushina whether he knew it or not. Naruto, do you know how dangerous that was? Jiraiya said and Naruto nodded. He rubbed the back of his head and chuckled from the spot where Kushina had slightly smacked him upside the head. Yeah, I do. Ka-san already told me about that, Naruto said and Jiraiya nodded agreeing with Kushina's method while said redhead was mentally laughing. What the hell, brat? Reviving your mother, lying to your mentor, telling him I said these things to you. I'm so proud, Kyuubi said making Naruto sweat drop at his biju. He didn't know how to take that comment though it did help to occupy his mind while Jiraiya stared at him for any detection of a lie so Naruto was able to play that off since his mind was elsewhere. Jiraiya then turned to Kushina and smiled. Well, I'll look into this, but I got to say. It's good to see you, Kushina, Jiraiya said patting the redhead on the shoulder. Kushina chuckled with a nod and grabbed Jiraiya's shoulder and proceeded to squeeze it a bit making the Sannin wince in pain. It's good to see you too, Jiraiya. Though I'd like a question to be answered for me, Kushina said and Jiraiya nodded. The woman turned to her son and smiled. Naruto-kun, why don't you go for a small walk? Jiraiya and I will be a minute, Kushina said with a smile that left no room for argument. Naruto gulped and nodded before heading for the door. He quickly closed it, but pressed his ear to the door. Now then, Jiraiya, please tell me why Naruto told me he grew up alone. If I recall, Minato and I told you and Tsunade to look after him, right? Kushina asked and Jiraiya backed away while the redhead cracked her knuckles as she slowly advanced on the cowering Sannin. Kushina, I wanted to take Naruto with me, but I had to maintain the spy network and then there was, Jiraiya paused and Kushina continued to smile. Oh Jiraiya, you act like that's an excuse. Now don't run cause this will only make things worse for you, Kushina said, and Naruto gulped and backed away from the door. Ah! Jiraiya yelled and Naruto shivered. He turned to the door and stood at attention with his hand to his forehead. Goodbye Arrow Sennin. I'll try to revive you if you die, Naruto said and left the hotel where there were multiple patrons who were complaining about the noise. Naruto exited the hotel and walked around the still lit up streets. He knew it was late, but he didn't care at the moment. No, right now he was thinking about his part to the agreement. Him having to kill 2 people. No way would they be any innocent people or people close to him, maybe bandits or other people like that were fine. Naruto sighed and walked the streets. He only had Jiraiya's experiences to go on, but he felt that experiencing it for himself was going to be different. It's not going to be easy, kid, but you'll just have to get over it. You don't have for another 7 days, so there's no rush, Kyuubi said, and Naruto looked at the ground. He knew that, but that was beside the point. He really didn't want to do it anyway, even if it was his job. I know, Kyuubi. I still don't want to, Naruto said, and Kyuubi nodded before fading. The blonde walked more along the road and settled for leaning on a tree. The blonde sighed and looked up at the sky. I know I'm asking the wrong person, but Kyuubi, do you find killing to really be that simple? Naruto asked. Kyuubi wasn't expecting that question in the least and decided to humor his container. Well, to you humans, you get all emotional over it, but for me it's simple. Your line of work revolves around it. 1 minute you're alive and the next you're meeting the Shinigami. Kid, the only thing I can tell is that when the time comes, just do it. Think about nothing else, just do it and it will be over in a flash, Kyuubi advised, and Naruto took note of it. The blonde figured it was okay to go back, but he didn't account to the explosion that just came off a few feet away. Naruto widened his eyes and turned to the source of the explosion. Naruto quickly jumped through the trees and took out a kunai. He paused and looked at the sharp object that could easily end someone's life. The blonde watched as the light shimmered across the kunai and held it in his hand. Naruto nodded to himself and shot forward through the trees. It took the blonde about 5 minutes, but he came up to a small caravan that caught on fire. He saw multiple bodies on the ground, making the blonde widen his eyes. Naruto looked around the place and soon he saw 2 people coming from the small fire. They were holding supplies and laughing like it was regular for them. Naruto narrowed his eyes in the trees and seethed. It had to be bandits, but way the hell out here, it was probably normal. We made a killing, bro, and I don't mean these losers. They really had some good stuff on them, one of them said to the other. From their talk, they were obviously brothers or something like it. You're such an idiot. Why'd you have to kill the 2 girls along with the guy? We could have used them, the older said, grinning like mad. They were carrying food supplies and some other things to go along with it. Naruto gritted his teeth and his chakra flared in proportion to his anger. Naruto gripped his kunai and for a split second he completely forgot about fulfilling his part of the contract to the Shinigami. He just wanted them to be caught, tried, or whatever that would be right. Oh well, what's done is done. Let's get out of here and leave these bodies to die in the fire, the older said, and the younger nodded before the 2 started to leave. Don't think I'm gonna let you leave just like that, Naruto yelled out as he came from the trees. Naruto startled the 2 bandits and both were shocked that the person who made them jump was a kid. Hee, you gave me quite the scare, little brat. Why don't you get lost and forgot what you saw here before I change my mind and kill you, the older brother said while the younger snickered. Come on Ni-san, let's kill him just so he won't go blabbering off to anyone, the younger said, and Naruto's hair covered his eyes. He looked at the burning carriage and while he knew the answer, he still asked this question. Did you 2 do this? Naruto asked, and immediately the younger brother snickered. The older grinned and placed his stuff down and started to walk up to the blonde. And what if we did? He asked. Naruto gritted his teeth and gripped his kunai. Kyuubi watched its container and it knew that if the guys continued in their stupidity they wouldn't live to regret it. Naruto had never killed before, but even he found heartless killing to be found as a danger and would go against it. Just answer me. Naruto yelled, and neither said anything until the older brother was right in front of his face. Yeah, we did it. Is that all? He asked, and immediately Naruto showed his eyes. They weren't the same ocean blue eyes that sought peace and determination, but red, slitted, showing rage and hatred. I'm sorry, Naruto said in a small whisper so low that neither could hear him. Naruto crossed his fingers. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto yelled, and soon one clone came into existence. It was all Naruto would need to deal with these two. Yeah, that's all. You just took someone's life for their things and you don't even feel regret for it, Naruto said, and what shocked the older bandit was that despite the rage, Naruto was crying. The man chuckled and sighed. That's life, brat, like it or hate, but you will experience it, the bandit said, and let out a punch while the younger cheered. Naruto narrowed his eyes and, thanks to his ninja training, dodged the punch and embedded his kunai into the man's chest. Blood poured from his form and dripped over Naruto's hands. The blonde gritted his teeth as he dug the kunai in deeper. The man screamed while the blood still poured on Naruto's hands. They shivered from the screaming, but he wanted them to pay. He held out his and the clone began to make the Rasengan inside the blonde's palm. Ni-san, the younger brother said, and Naruto held his Rasengan in his hands. This might have been overkill, or maybe Naruto was letting his emotions run wild, but that didn't matter at the moment. Rasengan, Naruto yelled as he slammed the spiraling sphere into the bandit's abdomen. With the pain of the kunai in his chest and the pain of feeling his body crushed by the Rasengan, the bandit was sent flying into the distance and slammed into a tree while Naruto turned to the younger one. I now understand, Haku. I know what you're saying, Naruto said as he came up to the younger brother. I don't want to kill you, but I will, Naruto said, and the younger bandit backed away. He gulped and took out a small knife. Naruto glared at him as the younger brother of the bandit charged at him. Naruto closed his eyes and held up his kunai. I'm sorry, Naruto said, and before he knew it all went dark. The blonde stood on the ground with his kunai in his hand. His right hand was tainted with blood and his kunai was dripping from it. The blonde huffed while his eyes seemed to be in some sort of shock. On the ground behind him was the younger brother bandit with his throat slit. Naruto gulped and huffed like he was too tired to comprehend anything else. Soon behind came Shin, who looked at the blonde and noticed his bloody kunai. Shin didn't say anything to Naruto as he knew the blonde wouldn't reply to anything anyway. So the death god floated over to the dead body and was about to take his soul, but Naruto quickly dashed in front of Shin and held out his hand. Shin, just give me a minute, Naruto said, and the Shinigami narrowed his eyes at his blonde summoner, but nodded and slowly backed away. Naruto looked at the dead man on the ground and his blonde hair covered his grief-filled eyes. What Jiraiya had told him about death seemed to be nothing compared to the real thing. The blonde cried for a bit and knelt down. Kyuubi, Shin, how do you guys deal with it? Naruto asked, and both the Biju and the death god thought over his question. Shin had been taking souls as far as he could remember, so it was rather difficult. Kyuubi seemed to be in the same boat. Well, it won't help you, but I did revel in war and killing. It seemed right to me, but I don't know if it's the stupid connection I have to your emotions, but I'm starting to find myself wrong. I just dealt with it and over time I got over it, Kyuubi said, and soon it was Shin's turn. I just know it's a part of all life. You must live with it, Shin said, and Naruto found it all to be true. He never felt like this. He had seen death, of course, but to do it yourself felt so different. Naruto turned around and walked back to his hotel. He didn't care what happened right now. He just wanted to get some sleep and forget all of this. Shin came up to the bodies and he took out his sword. He quickly slashed at the bandit, ripping his soul from his body. He grabbed the soul and it away into nothingness. One to fill the space of the revived person, Shin said, and floated to the other body that was slammed into the tree. The fierce burn marks on his body, especially around the abdomen, and the semi-large strike to his chest guaranteed a quick death. And one for a small interest. It must be hard, Shin said and quickly took the soul, then disappeared, leaving the two lifeless bodies on the ground. With Naruto, the blonde trudged through the streets of the town with the small act put behind him. He didn't want to think about it at the moment, all he knew was that he wanted to get some sleep. He came up to the hotel and walked inside. It struck him as weird that the receptionist didn't see a blonde kid with blood on the right side of his sleeve in his kunai, but he didn't care. That just saved him a lot more time for not explaining. Naruto walked up the stairs and towards his room. The blonde heard talking on the other side and knew it was his mother and Jiraiya. He opened the door and looked at them watching him. "Hey Sochi, you were gone for a bit," Kushina said, and Naruto gave a simple smile. Both the Toad Sage and the revived Red Death widened their eyes when they saw Naruto's right arm. The blonde didn't even have the mindset to put away his kunai after the act. "Sochi, what happened?" Kushina asked. Jiraiya seemed interested also, and the blonde looked at the ground. He quickly discarded the top half of his orange jumpsuit and placed it on the floor. "It's nothing, Ka-san. I'm going to bed now," Naruto said, and without taking off his pants or even pulling the covers over him, Naruto laid on the bed and dropped his kunai to the ground. He didn't care about it right now. Kushina and Jiraiya looked at each other, and while Jiraiya didn't know what was wrong with Naruto, he had a hint from the bloody side of his jacket and the kunai. Kushina seemed to know also. Naruto had told her the conditions for her revival. She was worried for her son. Death wasn't something that she would ever want Naruto to experience doing, but she knew it came with the job he was in. She made it a point to talk to Naruto when he woke up tomorrow. "Well, Kushina, I'm gonna follow Naruto's lead and go to bed also. I guess you should get some clothes tomorrow," Jiraiya said, and Kushina nodded in agreement with him. For now, she would sleep in the clothes she had. Kushina climbed up to Naruto's bed and laid down next to him. Kushina wasn't sure if Naruto was still awake or not, but she wrapped her arms around her son and brought his body closer to hers. "Sochi, don't worry over it. I know you'll get through it. I don't think I could say this to you, no, but thank you. I can't imagine how you must be feeling now that you've killed someone, and while I'm not all that thrilled about it being for me, I am happy that you feel that way." "Thank you, Sochi," Kushina said as she closed her eyes and went to sleep. Jiraiya turned off the lights to the room and the entire place was engulfed in silence and darkness. Jiraiya went to sleep, but Kushina and Naruto stayed awake. Well, Naruto was awake, but his mother didn't know that since his back was turned to her. Naruto remembered her words and they made the blonde happy, if only for that time. He knew it would be hard, but he would get over it. Instead of worrying about it, Naruto would just adjust to it. He would forever feel grief and guilt for it, but he would take Kyuubi's full advice and get over it. He had to if he wanted to do what he needed. "Thank you, Ka-san," Naruto said with a smile and closed his eyes. Kushina grinned and nodded before falling asleep also. Next morning, somewhere in the fields of town, Naruto, Jiraiya and Kushina were out in the middle of the field as they decided to work with Naruto on his control. Well, Kushina mainly. She had decided to take over Naruto's training since she had always wanted to do so as his mother. Jiraiya had no objection to it in the slightest and wanted to see how Kushina could do as a teacher. Naruto had been in a bit better shape and figured that training would get his mind off of the incident from yesterday. Jiraiya had gone off back to town while Kushina was introducing taijutsu to Naruto, and the blonde wanted so much to hate his mother right then. "Man, Sochi, you've got no real taijutsu stance." "Well, don't worry. Ka-san's gonna straighten that out of you right now by teaching you her taijutsu style," Kushina said as Naruto fell to the ground and huffed. "Ka-san, you're crazy," Naruto said, and Kushina chuckled at her son. She swiped her hand through her hair and watched Naruto get to his feet. "Practice makes perfect, Sochi, now do it again," Kushina said, and Naruto went through the difficult katas of his mother's taijutsu. She called it decapitation taijutsu, which revolved around hitting precise points of the body and making it useless, or even more effective was to cut the limbs off or make it seem that way. Perfect for a kenjutsu user. Kushina had said that she invented the style herself and it was a renowned style in Konoha. Pretty good Sochi, Kushina said, and Naruto strained a nod of thanks. Well, you take a break. I'm gonna go and get some clothes, Kushina said, walking off. Naruto nodded and watched his mother leave. He stayed underneath a tree and sighed as he felt more and more relaxed. Wake up, Blondie, Shin said, making Naruto gasp as he turned around. The raised an eyebrow to see his summon there and stood to his feet. Don't do that, Naruto said, making the Shinigami chuckle. Naruto then widened his eyes and smiled. It might not have been much, but he managed to get the Shinigami to laugh. So what do you want? I honored our contract, right? Naruto asked, and the Shinigami nodded. He then rummaged through his white robes and pulled out a scroll. It's time you also became my actual summoner, the Shinigami said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Naruto asked, and the Shinigami grinned as he set the scroll down next to the bed. Naruto Uzumaki, it's time for you to learn how to use my powers. I'm going to teach you the forbidden jutsus of a death god, Shin said, and Naruto widened his eyes. Even Kyuubi was interested in this one. What do you mean learn your jutsus? Naruto asked, and the Shinigami grinned. I'm gonna make you a human Shinigami, Shin said, and if Naruto was surprised, then this was drop dead stunning. It was official, Shin was the best summon in the world. But I've only just got your contract. Don't you think that it might be a rush? Naruto asked, and Shin raised an eyebrow. He did see Naruto's point and went over his words. I suppose that's true. For what I have planned as you are now, it might kill you if not for our contract, Shin said, and Naruto gulped. He wondered what Shin could possibly want him to do. Then how about you give me another 3 weeks just to get used to this, then you can teach me all those cool jutsus, Naruto said. Normally he would kill for the chance to learn anything new, especially from Shin, but he just wanted the time to get over last night's incident, so this would help him if only slightly. Fine, I guess. I do want to see what you can come up with in a fight, so I won't rush this, Shin said, and Naruto grinned with a nod. Immediately the Shinigami faded and the blonde sighed. He then slumped on the 3 while Kyuubi decided to come in. What's wrong with you, brat? Normally you never shut up about training, but you want to wait for this one? Kyuubi asked, and Naruto chuckled. I suppose. Don't worry, I'm gonna learn those amazing techniques. I can't wait to see the look on everyone's face when I show them how good I am. Tsunade Bachan might give me that hat right then and there, Naruto said as his eyes gleamed with excitement. Kyuubi's sweat dropped and shook his head at his blonde container. And to think I worried about him over nothing, Kyuubi thought and widened his eyes. He was worried about Naruto. No way in hell. He hated all humans, he wanted to kill them all. He was a damn demon for Kami's sake. How the hell could he be worried about anyone? You alright? You just went silent, Naruto said, shocking Kyuubi. I'm fine and I don't need you worrying about me, Kyuubi said, and immediately cut the connection, making Naruto raise an eyebrow. What the hell just happened? Naruto wondered, and immediately the blonde turned his head to see his mother and sensei coming back. She was carrying something in her hands. It was wrapped in a cloth and Kushina had an expression of glee on her face. Hello Sochi, did you enjoy your break? Kushina asked, and Naruto nodded, not having his eyes leave the sight of what his mother could possibly be holding. Yeah, it was nice, Ka-san, Naruto said, and Kushina nodded. Well, that's nice, Databane. Now then, I have a surprise for you, Kushina said, and dropped the clothed item into Naruto's lap. The blonde raised an eyebrow at the gift and turned to his mother. What's this, Ka-san? Naruto asked, and Kushina kept a gentle smile across her face. Naruto gave her a small grin and she urged him to unwrap the small gift. Naruto chuckled at the very early birthday present. He had never gotten a present before except for some practice kunai from Iruka and Sarutobi at one time. All the other times were just a quick hello and happy birthday greeting, or maybe a treat to Ichiraku ramen for Naruto, so to get something else especially from his mother was a good feeling. The blonde finished unwrapping his gift and widened his eyes. Inside the cloth was a medium-sized sword with a slight curve to its shape. The handle was orange with a small red swirl hanging off the back end of the. Next to his sword was a black sheath with an orange flame pattern. Ka-san? Naruto asked in shock and Kushina grinned. I'm going to teach you all that I know, Sochi. I want you to follow in the footsteps of our clan, your father, and your mother. I know you can do it, Kushina said, and Naruto's eyes gleamed. He'd be learning his mother's kenjutsu, his father's other techniques, and the Uzumaki clan's jutsus. It was all a lot for the blonde to take in for himself. How did you pay for this? Naruto asked, and Kushina smiled while waving around a wallet. Oh, Jiraiya helped me. He said no at first, but I convinced him to help me, Kushina said with her smile never leaving her face, which made Naruto gulp. Mothers are scary, Naruto said and got to his feet. The blonde took the sword into his hands and he watched his mother get into a taijutsu stance. Well, come on, Sochi. I'm in charge of your training and we're gonna make up for lost time as mother and son, Kushina said, and Naruto grinned. He would want nothing more than that. Just be ready, Ka-san. I'll show you that I'm worthy to be called an Uzumaki, Naruto said, and Kushina chuckled. Definitely is my son, Kushina said and stared at Naruto. Well, I'm gonna show you why people called me the Red Death, Kushina said, and Naruto chuckled. Ero Sennin told me, you were so fast that the only thing people saw was a blur of your beautiful red hair, Naruto said, and Kushina hid a small blush across her face and smiled. Oh, he told you that? You the second person to compliment my hair, Kushina said, and Naruto grinned at that. His mother's hair really was beautiful. It made the blonde wonder what it was like to have his mother's hair. It might have made him look cool, but he had to admit that it wouldn't go with his orange jumpsuit. Let me guess that Tu-san was the first? Naruto asked, and Kushina nodded. That's right. The both of us called it the Red String of Fate, Kushina said, and Naruto wondered about it. That name had a nice ring to it. Well, that's enough talk. Show me what you got, Sochi, Kushina said, and Naruto nodded with a grin. Gotcha, Ka-san. Here I go, Datbeo, Naruto yelled and charged his mother with his sword that he would be using in the future. Kushina smiled as she watched her son came at her. That form is sloppy and his grip is weak. Oh, Sochi, you have much to learn, but you are my Sochi, Kushina said in thought with a smile as both mother and son trained the day away. Kushina watched Naruto pant and huff his frustration as he rested on the ground. Naruto had been training with his mother in kenjutsu for the past 3 hours and his mother was brutal. She really didn't know how to hold back at all. Naruto couldn't even get one chance at her, but how could he? She was a former kenjutsu legend and she was too fast to see. At times Naruto lost the sight of her altogether and Kushina would joke that she would have already killed him at least 1,000 times already. Naruto pouted at his mother, but he knew it to be true. He just couldn't match up to his mother, but that didn't mean he would give up. He would beat her at her own game and she would drop her jaw when she saw what he could do. Currently the redhead and the blonde were still in the training field with Naruto panting and staring at his mother's form over him. She had that arrogant smirk on her face which made the blonde pout. Well, Naru-kun, your kenjutsu is horrible and your taijutsu, well, moving along with that, Kushina said, and Naruto's eyebrow twitched. He really would make his mother eat those words. Maybe not today, maybe not in a year, but he would make her pay someday. It's not my fault. I've never held a katana before in my life and I tried to make my own taijutsu, but Kakashi-sensei never really taught me that, Naruto said, and Kushina raised an eyebrow. She remembered Kakashi. How could she not? The white-haired boy spent almost all his time with Minato. She figured it was purely out of simple respect and admiration. Kakashi didn't teach you anything. He told me that he'd be more than thrilled to teach you when I had you, Kushina said, and Naruto raised an eyebrow. Sounds like people told him and his mother a lot of things. He's been training Sasuke the whole time. He never really trained me except in tree walking, Naruto said, and Kushina's red hair covered her eyes. Naruto saw her clench her hands into fists and giggled, making Naruto gulp. Is that so? Kushina said and looked at the sky. Naruto didn't know what his mother was thinking, but it must have been downright evil. Run, Kakashi-sensei! Naruto yelled, and back in Konoha, said Jonin sneezed and a shiver ran down his spine before he felt the urge to count down the rest of his life before something happened. Meanwhile, Kushina decided to help her son up to his feet and rested him against the tree for shade. Well, Naruto-kun, we have more than enough time to straighten you out. Tell me what you can do and I'll help you improve on it, Kushina said, and Naruto nodded. He went over all of his abilities and told her about the Kage Bunshin technique and his completion of the Rasengan. Kushina smiled at everything. Leave it to her son to have two powerful techniques at his disposal. Naruto had variations of the Kage Bunshin, but other than that, those two techniques were all he had currently. He of course told her about the summoning contract with the toads and the Shinigami, which made Kushina stiffen, but she seemed to forget about it. When Naruto was done, Kushina crossed her arms and smiled. You're just like me, Naru-kun, Kushina said, and Naruto wondered what she meant by that. Kushina giggled and elaborated for Naruto. What I mean is that you learn from doing something. I was never one for books. I hated the things, but you give me something to do physically, then I got it down in no time at all. That's how we'll teach you, Naruto. Remember, I told you that I would teach you my taijutsu and kenjutsu. Jiraiya will work on your chakra control and I'll watch him when he does. He told me about these 2 years you have to train and we'll make every one of those days count, Kushina said, and Naruto nodded with a look of sheer determination. Naruto stood to his feet and raised his fist to his mother. I'll do it, Ka-san. I'll make you proud and I'll stun Konoha with my amazing skills, Naruto said, and Kushina nodded. He really was her son after all. Kushina stood to her feet and patted her son's head. All right then, get out.